We'll start off with agenda item 1, apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At 2 minutes past 4, we have 30 members on the call. The one member of council who we cannot see on the call at the moment is Councillor Bolton. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Item 2, confirmation of minutes. This is one set of minutes as for the 8th of December to approve as a true and correct record of that meeting. If everybody's happy with those minutes, we'll do this one by exception. So if anybody has any issues, please, I should have said this to start with, use the chat box, don't use the hand. So we're going for chat box as before. If you want to ask a question, just put question. If you want to get into a debate, when we have debate, just write debate. So there's no confusion, no use of the hand. Thank you. So
as you've been speaking, Mr. Mayor, there's nobody typing in the chat box reference the accuracy of the minutes.
Okay, thank you. So we can take that, that's agreed. Item 3, declarations of interest. I invite members to declare any personal or disclosable pecuniary interests. Any declarations will need to state if the interest is personal or a disclosable pecuniary and the nature of that interest.
There does not appear to be anyone typing there, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. For Mr. White's, just a note, you'll probably see me muting quite a bit this afternoon because my cough's not so good. And I don't want to deafen everybody. Right, item 4, communications from me. I'd like to just take this time just to thank formally all the doctors, nurses and volunteers for the very well organised vaccinations that have been carried out across our borough. I do understand that some people are concerned about having the jab, but for me, it was a case of what is best for our community. So I could have the jab, which should eventually stop the spread of the virus, or I could have continued to do as I've been doing for the last year, live like a hermit and stay indoors. So I think my choice for having the vaccination was the right one. My thanks also go to our staff for all the time they've devoted to this pandemic, and especially to those who are processing the grants to get the money out to those who need them most. I know that we have staff that are still working 6 days a week to make sure that they get through the workload. But we must be aware that this can't just continue into the future, as the staff involved will certainly see their work/home life balance suffer. But everybody who's been involved, the volunteers, which I know some of the volunteers who've been working with our communities are on this at this meeting today. You all have my sincere thanks. Okay, item 5, business brought forward by myself. We have no items at the moment. Item 6, public questions. We have no public questions submitted. Item 7, questions on notice. No questions on notice received from members. And item 8, motions on notice. No motions on notice received from members. That's the quick way to get through an agenda. Now we get to the meat. Item 9, committee minutes. A hub committee meeting 8th of December 2020. Councillor Jury, would you like to present the minutes, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the minutes of the meetings of the Hub Committee held on 8th of December 2020 and the 2nd of February 2021 be received and noted, with the exception of recommendations HC 48, HC 49 and HC 58. They are HC 42 to HC 49 and HC 50 to HC 59 and can be found between pages 11 and 13 and 15 and 19 of the agenda papers. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
That's noted. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, you're on mute.
Another pound. Yes, sorry, thank you. Any questions?
There are no questions, Mr. Mayor, so I think we're now moving on to the recommendations, starting with HC 48.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In respect of recommendation HC 48, I propose the following. That council be recommended to transfer £220,000 into a COVID earmarked reserve to protect against future COVID losses in 2021-2022, as set out in section 1.8 of the presented agenda report to the Hub Committee, and fund £30,000 of audio-visual equipment for the Tavistock Guildhall Heritage Project, and to finance this from the business rates retention earmarked reserve, as set out in section 7 of the presented agenda report to the Hub Committee. If there are any questions, I would be happy to take those.
There's nobody typing in the chat box for that recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second the recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much. So
there is nobody typing debate in the chat box, Mr. Mayor, either, so I think we can move to the vote.
One can hope the keyboards are still working, but I don't want you to test them, but just in case. Okay.
Can I suggest for this recommendation? Sorry.
Yeah, I was about to say the same as you. So if we do this again by exception, be quite helpful. So if anybody's got any concerns they want to put forward, you could type now.
Just giving it a second, Mr. Mayor, but nobody's indicating they're typing any opposition to recommendation HC 48, so we can therefore assume that one is therefore declared carried. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In respect of recommendation HC 49, I propose the following. That council be recommended to continue to be part of the Devon Business Rates Pool for 2021-22, subject to there being no announcements within the finance settlement, which was announced in the week commencing 14th of December 2020, and which, in the opinion of the Section 151 officer, in consultation with the leader of the council and the portfolio holder for finance, would change this recommendation. There was no announcements that affect this recommendation in the finance settlement package. So that is the recommendation that is brought forward, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second that recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No.
None there, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Jury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In respect of recommendation HC 58, I propose the following. That council be recommended to adopt the Devon District's procurement strategy 2019 to 2022. This was the subject of an email that came around today with an updated appendix. Hopefully council have had a chance to look at that, but if I could get a seconder for that recommendation, please.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions?
Not in the chat box, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. We go. Any debate?
Again, nothing in the chat box, Mr. Mayor.
We'll go for a vote. If everybody's happy, we'll do the same as we've done previously and take this by exception. Anybody got any concerns, please type now.
Given it a couple of seconds, Mr. Mayor, but there's no one indicating they are typing any concerns with that recommendation. So once again, I think we can assume that one is declared carried by unanimous vote. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Now, if we go to B, Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting, 10th of November 2020, could I ask Councillor Ewings to present the minutes, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to prove that there is somebody else here, different voice.
Thank you.
I move that the minutes of the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 10th of November 2020 be received and noted. They are ONS 37 to ONS 48 and can be found between the pages 21 and 25. If I may have a seconder, please.
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions?
Nobody's typing in the chat box, Mr. Mayor, so we can assume those are duly noted. Thank you.
Thank you. C, Development Management and Licensing Committee meeting 12th of January 2021. Can I ask Councillor Yellen to present the minutes, please?
Councillor Yelland has been having some connection issues, Mr. Mayor. I can't see if she's online at the moment. No, it doesn't appear she's online, Mr. Mayor.
Could I ask Councillor Pearce to take this, please?
Yes, okay, Mr. Mayor. I'll just get that particular item up on my screen. If you can just bear with me a minute.
Yes, thanks, Frank.
Please. Right, Mr. Mayor, I present to you the minutes of the DM and L committee meeting held on the 12th of January 2021, as set out on, I don't know which page it's on actually, I haven't got that on my agenda, I'm sorry.
I've got page 27 through to.
Right, okay, thank you. And then members hopefully will have read all these and will be aware. And I would ask for a seconder, please.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. Questions? Any questions?
Nothing in the chat box, Mr. Mayor, so we can assume those are duly noted. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Pearce, for standing in there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't aware there was a problem with Councillor.
Yes, IT's not been the best today.
No.
I found. Item 10, Revenue Budget Proposal for 2020-21. I'd like to ask Councillor Jury to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, you have in front of you our revenue budget proposals for 2021-22. These are part of our normal budget setting process and sit within our 5-year medium-term financial strategy as detailed in the papers. I'm grateful to all members for their input into this process and also for the, as usual, exemplary work of Mrs. Buckle and her team in putting the proposals together. Members should note that a balanced budget is proposed despite financial pressures of some 434,000 as detailed in Appendix A. This is achieved by virtue of savings of some 344,000 as detailed in Appendix A, a proposed increase of Band D council tax by £5, the use of £193,000 of new homes bonus to set out in 4.24, and an unexpected lower tier services grant from central government of £70,000. All of this provides for a net revenue expenditure for next year of £7.3 million, enabling the council to continue to provide key services and to step up and support our communities and economy as the recovery from the pandemic starts. I'd like to add a word here on council tax. The Borough Council is charged with collecting council tax for a number of organisations, including fire, police, Devon County, and town and parish precepts. Our share of that tax for a Band D property is about 1/10 of the council tax bill at around £4.65 a week. Members will know that in exchange for that, we provide a wide range of services, including waste and recycling collection, housing and housing benefits, food hygiene and public health, planning, local economic development, and so on. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the council has been fully involved in the local effort, engaging with community groups, providing advice and guidance, directing funding to enable social distancing in town centres, and coordinating the distribution of 13 different business grants to local businesses. The level of council tax we charge is probably higher than I would like, and I fully appreciate the difficulties of even a small increase at this time. However, it does, I believe, represent good value for money and is a vitally important part of our income. On the subject of income, we now receive no revenue support grant from government and are pretty much reliant on the income we raise directly from council tax, business rates and commercial activity. That income has been dramatically affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and may continue to be affected in coming months. For that reason, the budget includes a proposal to transfer £281,000, being the 5th tranche of COVID funding, to an earmarked reserve to cover future losses or be used in recovery projects where assistance is needed. On the subject of grants and government support, I would like to register my thanks here to the government, which has provided unprecedented and exemplary financial support to councils up and down the country. Without that support, we would not be in the position that we are currently. I would not be able to recommend this budget, and we would not have been able to support our communities in the way we have, or to have continued to provide key services in the way we have. I'd also like to commend the support and leadership provided by Devon County Council throughout this whole pandemic. They have ensured that districts have worked together, they have provided financial support to the most vulnerable, and have worked with Team Devon to mitigate the worst effects of the crisis. As a result, Devon has been well prepared, has reported fewer cases and deaths, and is better placed to recover from the crisis as a result. Members will note from the report in section 2 that the council's core spending power has increased by 2.6%. Whilst welcome, this increase comes mostly from increases to council tax and does not provide the council with any additional resources it might need to lead a recovery. It's worth noting that rural districts have the lowest increased spending power when viewed against other authorities in the table shown in the report at 2.3. And this is only after the elimination of negative revenue support grant payments in the current year. This is despite the acknowledged increased costs that are connected to our rurality and isolation. And although the new lower tier services grant will help, we will continue to lobby via the Rural Services Network and the Devon Districts Forum for a fairer settlement in future that reflects the difficulties we face. Members will also be aware of a request that came through the budget workshops to provide additional support for the Community Service Partnership. A business case has been made and is attached at section 5.2. Whilst sympathetically received at Hub, it was felt that more data was needed in order to consider the best way of providing support across the borough to, in particular, young people affected by the pandemic. Officers have therefore been asked to work with the Community Service Partnership to come back with a proposal for consideration by the Council as soon as is practically possible. This should not prevent us from setting a budget. Funds to provide support are available in reserves. It is the nature and scope of that support which is yet to be determined. Finally, the report sets out a number of proposals to approve the level of fees and charges which make up an intrinsic part of the Council's income. Proposed charges are set out at Appendix E, together with a request for delegated authority to adjust fees and charges to reflect inflation, if required, under report to the Hub Committee. Members, I commend this balanced budget to you and will be pleased to take any questions.
Any questions at all?
There are none in the chat box, Mr. Mayor.
Right, so we go to the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In which case, I would like to propose the recommendations that are in your agenda. They are recommendations Roman numerals 1 through Roman numerals 15 and can be found on pages 33 and 34 of your agenda papers. Could I have a seconder for those recommendations, please?
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you. Debate.
No debate, Mr. Oh, there is now. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Spettigue, Councillor Renders.
Councillor Spettigue, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to address the matter of our proposed increase to council tax contributions. No doubt, like you all, I've given this much thought, and I'll be honest, I've changed my opinion on the matter several times whilst giving it my consideration. After the year that society's endured, it strikes me that in some ways it would be a kindness not to increase our portion of the council tax, to offer a small amount of economic respite as well as a bit of a morale boost for society in general. That said, I'm mindful that the impact of this lost increase in the revenue will be felt for many years in the finances of the authority. And as I'm increasingly becoming aware, this is a delicate balance that needs to be maintained. I'm one of the members who have indicated a desire to see increased funding made available for the Community Safety Partnership. And in asking the authority to consider additional funds for the partnership, I understand that outlays such as this are not sustainable without increases in revenue. On that basis, and with respect to the need to balance our finances, I feel that I'm inclined to vote for this budget proposal and the £5 council tax increase that is included within it.
Thank you. Councillor Renders, please.
Thank you. Well, Councillor Spettigue took the bit. My opening line was almost identical to his, actually. I think we need to have a look at the increase, but I've given this a lot of thought. I've spoken to a lot of people, and I've got to put my ward first, and the people that voted me in to start off with, and I've spoken to a lot of them. You've got to look at the area that I'm in, given the fact that we're very much reliant on tourism. We've got a large number of people that are on the breadline almost, and are going to be hit even more when the furlough ends, because they work in pubs and they work in cafes. And I just would have liked to have seen us do like a lot of the parish councils done, and not have included that. Just been the ones that stood up and said, no, I understand the reasons behind it, and I've been torn all the way with this. But my conscience and the feeling within the ward, with my ward, is that I'm going to vote against it, and I'm probably going to be the one that does, but I just feel morally that it's the right thing to do. I think we need to be not just giving it words and saying we're sorry. I just think it would have been nice. And I know that the big rise is not made up of ourselves, but I just thought it would have been nice if we could have stood up and, you know, and looked to give a little bit more back. I'm not saying that we don't, and I understand the reasons behind it. It's just how I feel on this one, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a very difficult one, this is, and I would like to thank our financial officers, Lisa Buckle and her team, for what they've brought forward and have achieved in bringing forward a balanced budget. It is difficult, and I can understand Councillor Render's reasons for his comments, but what we have to remember is that if we do not increase the council tax this year, that is compounded as we move forward, and each year going onwards we will have that loss of income. And unfortunately, with the way the government have set out the caps on the upper tier councils, we won't be able to gain it because we're still limited to that 2% or £5 increase each year, whereas the parish councils, and I've had quite deep discussions with my parishes over this, that they're in a fortunate position that they can hold down an increase this year, but once the economy picks up over the next 18 months, they will be able to increase theirs with no cap on at the moment. There's no cap on their precept requirement. So they can regain that money that's been lost in this year, which we won't be able to do. So I urge members to support the recommendation for the council tax increase. I know it's hard, but one has to make difficult decisions when we're in this position and think of how things are going to be longer term. So I support the recommendation with a heavy heart, but it has to be done. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Musgrave.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I just refer briefly to the Community Safety Partnership bid? I'm entirely happy. I've spoken to Mr. Hawke, and I'm entirely happy with the way that it is being proposed to go forward with this. So I just wanted to confirm my support for that approach. Could I also just add, could I be and endorse the comments made? The actual volume of work that Mrs. Buckle and her team have gone through is quite staggering in my view. I've never seen anything like it. The volume of detail that has had to be achieved is quite extraordinary. So if I could just convey my thanks and appreciation to the work that's been done. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hipsey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just basically say that I too have thought this over long and hard. And I think at the end of the day, what has given me the confidence to vote for this increase is, in fact, knowing that we have a very strong finance team behind this. And having that confidence makes it somewhat easier to make the decision. And that's certainly the way I intend to go. I'd also like to thank the leader, if I may, for giving a little bit of explanation about the council tax structure. I think it's important that the people that vote us in do understand the way council tax works. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there, and it's important that the people, as I said, that do vote us in understand that what we're voting for here is a very small proportion of their total council tax expenditure. And so thank you very much for that, Councillor Jorry. It's very helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't repeat much of what's said. Councillor Pearce said pretty much what I was going to say in regards to the compound follow-on year after year. It's a very difficult decision, but really I don't think we have much choice. And I think, as Councillor Hipsey rightly said, that percentage-wise it's a very small amount of the increase of the overall amount. I will be supporting this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Jerry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm grateful to members for their thoughts and comments and their very obvious concerns. I can assure you that we have at every stage of this process thought very long and hard. We have both the limitations of the cap, that means that, as Councillor Pearce explained, we cannot take a hit one year and recover it when things are better. If we take a hit this year, the long-term effects of that will be with the council for a long time, and we'll be struggling to catch up. We've also been locked into a cycle over recent years of having to find savings to provide for reductions in core government funding. That stagger has now unwound, if you like, and perhaps in future, if we can make suitable structural savings without affecting our capacity to deliver, we may be able to take a different view on increases to council tax, but I don't think that time is now. I hear entirely what Councillor Render says about his ward and the reliance on tourism and associated industries within that area. I would come back and say that it is vitally important that we locally have funds available, as we have put aside, in order to adopt local initiatives to help with destination marketing, to help with attracting people into the area as tourists, and to work on our appeal so that we get more people coming in and we give our tourism industry a boost. And we would not be in a position to be able to put funds aside to help with that process if we were not increasing our council tax at this time. I'm also reassured that, of course, there is help in place for those that are most affected, and there is funding available for people who really need it, if and when they really need it. So I hope that helps members. I will be supporting the increase, and I will be supporting the budget in its entirety. But thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Hello, thanks Neil. That was really useful summary and useful addition to what we've already said. My sort of comment really is about how an increase in council tax looks at the moment, following on from what much of everybody has said. You know, I'm concerned about how the message goes out and how that will be received after really an appalling year for everybody. You know, that said, I have every confidence in the budgeting team and Mrs. Buckle's team, and also, you know, in the communications team as well. I'm sure we can work together to make sure that the right message goes out to the people that we serve, you know, to ensure that they sort of understand why the council tax has to go up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be very grateful for an understanding of how the communications will tackle this, because obviously, as everybody has been saying, this is a very sensitive subject, and it would be very nice if it was delicately produced for this reason. And I was just wondering what the plans were.
Who would like to answer that one, please?
I think I can probably answer that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
There will be a press release which will be going out immediately following this meeting, which will summarise the debate and will summarise the increase and how it splits down and the proportion that is applicable to West Devon. So that will be going out pretty soon after this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. So is that obviously press releases are aimed at different parts of the community. Is that aimed at the householder? Is that aimed at the the general understanding across the society? At what level will that be aimed?
Yeah, as council tax is very much aimed at the householder, because it's a tax that the householder pays. It will contain some information about the increase that relates to West Devon and the services that West Devon provides in exchange for the council tax that is paid. So I hope that it will be sufficient. When council tax demands are sent out, there is also information that goes out with those demands, which explains what it is that the different parts of council tax pay for. So I think there's a very extensive bit of information that goes out and gets out to every single household.
Okay, Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'd just like to thank everybody who has been involved in the budget. Mrs. Buckle and her team. I know everyone has applauded her for the hard work that she's done. I too have been deliberating and find it. I've gone one way and the other for quite some time. I'm aware that the local population, the businesses are struggling with the COVID lockdown and the loss of earnings. And I think to add an increase at this particular time is the wrong thing to do. However, looking at where we are where we are. And unfortunately, I think we have a fait accompli. When we look at the report by Mrs. Buckle, it said that the council has faced unprecedented reductions in government funding between 2009 and 2021. And currently, the core government funding has been reduced by £3 million. So we need to put the public need to be aware that we're in now position because of not only other things, but the central government funding, the loss of new homes bonus, etc. And as I say, I have deliberated, and as much as I don't want to increase the council tax, albeit only £5 a year, by £5 on Band D, I find that I am coming around to the view that, and having listened to all the debate today, that I must vote for it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So listening to the debate, I think I'm just going to follow on really with something in a similar vein, thinking that it seems inevitable that we're going to have year-on-year council tax rises in order to keep our services going, and because the government funding has dramatically reduced. So I just want to make sure that West Devon Borough Council have got enough support in place for people who are struggling to pay their council tax and other debts. And it's like there is likely to be more people in financial hardship following COVID and the absolute destruction that's made to our local, particularly tourist industries. And I just want to make sure that we can say, if we do vote for this, that the people that are in the most hardship can get some help. Thank you.
Thank you. Would someone like to respond to that? Councillor Jury.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Yes, there is provision in place for the hardest hit to apply for assistance with their council tax, as there is for them to apply for assistance from other forms of social security support. So I'm confident that we can cope with that. We have built some figures into the budget, and I think that there is, from my point of view, there is sufficient help and assistance there for those people that really need it. Other than that, it's as you say, there is at the moment a requirement, I think, to have this small increase. That by no means commits us to increases in future, and I'm really hopeful that at some point in the future we may be able to break that cycle and offer even better value for money.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bridgewater, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I too have thought long and hard about this, and but I feel that morally I should stay with my ward members when we've had meetings on the town square, meet your councillor meetings. One of the biggest gripes is the council tax and the fact that it keeps going up. And whilst I fully understand that West Devon only put theirs up a little bit, and we're not responsible for the precepts of the town councils and fire and police services, it's just, for me at this point in time, we are in unprecedented times. Many people are on 80% of their wages and may not even have jobs to go back to when we finally come on the other side of this. So I just feel that I'm going to support Councillor Enders, I think, and I will be voting against this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Cheadle, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make one comment which hasn't raised its head in the debate and comments so far, and that is inflation. And of course, one of the things that doesn't stop even during pandemics is inflation. And so were we not to raise the council tax by the modest amount we have proposed, we would fall behind that curve, as others have noticed. And as the leader said, there is absolutely no mechanism in place for catching up subsequently. So I shall be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more debate?
None there, Mr. Mayor.
Now I've got here to confirm the wording of the substantive motion. Does Councillor Jury like to do a sum up?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I wonder whether we should take the recommendation to increase council tax separately and then take the other items on block. I don't know whether that would be seen to be a reasonable suggestion.
I'm happy to do that if everybody else is. If we can have some comment on that. If
I'm
not,
prepared to accept that proposal.
okay.
I support that proposal, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. So to recap, we'll deal with these in two tranches. The first being the recommendation is recommended to council, item Roman numerals 1, to set an increase in council tax for 2021-22 of £5, band D of £241.63 for 21-22, an increase of 10 pence per week or £5 per year, equating to a 2.11% increase. If I could have a seconder for that one, please.
Happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. White, this one will need to be by named votes, please.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. So members, we are voting purely on part 1 of the recommendation at this time. So members, therefore, in alphabetical order, Councillor Ball.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
For.
Councillor Bridgewater.
Against.
Councillor Cheadle.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Coulson.
For.
Crozier.
For.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Daniel.
For.
Councillor Edmonds.
For.
Councillor Ewings.
For.
Councillor Hayworth.
For.
Councillor Hipsey.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Jury.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Leach.
For.
Moody.
Reluctantly for.
Thank you, Councillor Mott.
For.
Councillor Moyes.
For.
Musgrave.
For.
Councillor Pearce.
For.
Ratcliffe.
For.
Councillor Renders.
Against.
Councillor Bridges.
For.
Councillor Samuel.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Sellis.
4.
Councillor Southcott.
4.
Councillor Spettigue.
4.
Councillor Vashon.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Wood.
4.
And finally, Councillor Yelland. Councillor Yelland. No, she's having a connection issue. Thank you, members. That is therefore by 28 votes in favour, 2 against. Part 1 of the recommendation is therefore declared carried. Thank you, members.
Thank you. If we can move on to the others on block.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, if I could recommend to Council the remainder of the revenue budget proposals from Roman numerals 2 through to Roman numerals 15, found on pages 33 and 34 of your agenda papers. If I could have a seconder for those en bloc proposals, please.
Happy to second those, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. White.
Thank you,
Named
Mr.
again, please.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, members. So, members, for parts 2 to 15 inclusive, Councillor Ball.
4, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgewater.
4.
Councillor Cheadle.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Coulson.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Crozier.
4.
Councillor Davies.
4.
Councillor Daniel.
4.
Councillor Edmonds.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Ewings.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Hayworth.
4.
Councillor Hipsey.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Jury.
4.
Councillor Kemp.
4.
Councillor Kimber.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Leach.
4.
Councillor Moody.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Mott.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Moyes.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Musgrave.
4.
Pearce.
4.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Renders.
Yes, 4.
Councillor Ridges.
4.
Councillor Samuel.
4.
Councillor Sellis.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Southcott.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Spettigue.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Vashon.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Wood.
4.
And Councillor Yelland. Just one final try, Councillor Yelland. No. That therefore, members, is 30 and unanimous in favour of parts 2 to 15 of the recommendation. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Excuse me. Item 11, capital budget proposals for 2020-21. I'd like to ask Councillor Jury to introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, you have in front of you the details of the 2021-22 capital budget, and it sets out the capital programme and shows how that will be funded. You'll note a number of elements to the programme. Community project grants, which are meant to provide equipment, funding for projects or repairs to buildings for community groups, £15,000. Affordable housing, which is to help subsidise affordable schemes that come forward, £50,000. Waste fleet replacement, which is part of an ongoing programme over the life of the waste contract with FCC, of £50,000. Disabled facility grants, which are means tested and fully funded by the Better Care Fund, of £860,000. And finally, replacement payroll and HR software and replacement IT equipment of £100,000, totaling £1.075 million. Members, I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
There is nobody typing, Mr. Mayor.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cheadle just
Yes, sorry.
put a request in, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask whether the reference to the waste fleet replacement, does that include working towards our sort of carbon neutral target, in that we are slowly moving the waste fleet away from diesel propulsion to some other form of propulsion? Do you happen to know whether that includes an element of that?
I'm certain that in the short term that's not the case, because there is nothing that will provide us with the range and the power that we need. But in the long term, that definitely has to be a consideration. I'm not sure whether Mrs. Buckle can provide me with any further information on that.
Mrs. Buckle.
Yes, thank you, Leader. My understanding is that those types of waste vehicles aren't yet available to purchase. So that would be a consideration in the longer term, but my understanding is those types of vehicles that would be able to service rural communities and do large amounts of mileage, they aren't in existence at the moment, but that is something that obviously we would consider for the future. I think areas that we could look at is our vehicle fleet, more for example for the locality officers, but not for the waste fleet at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Just for interest, I understood that somewhere in the country there's an authority that's running hydrogen vehicles for their waste fleet. So they're there, but I expect tremendous cost. Councillor Crozier, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a very big disabled budget. I presume this budget is cost neutral, because obviously we've managed this sum of money and all the projects that go in it.
Thank you, Councillor Crozier. It is absolutely cost neutral. It's fully funded, as I said, from government sources, and it's clearly a very important part of the work that we do in helping to make the lives of those of our residents that need this sort of assistance a little bit easier.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel, please.
Mr. Mayor, before we move on, Councillor Mott has put a request about the comment about the waste fleet question before we move on.
Councillor Mott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My apologies. I put my hand up. I forgot that we needed to make a comment in order for you to be able to see it with so many things going on for you. Yeah, it's just to let you know that currently we have no plans at the moment to purchase fleet other than those run on diesel. However, we are closely watching the other councils that are currently trialling the ones that are using the hydro-treated vegetable oil, and also that Nottingham is one of the first councils to go electric on its RCV fleet. So we will be paying close attention to how they get on with that, bearing in mind, of course, Nottingham is not as rural as our district, but we are paying close attention to it. We are monitoring what other councils are doing and how they get on with different fleets, and with a plan to obviously follow that through at some other date. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was about the community project grant for public buildings, and I just wondered whether these will include improvements to energy efficiency for public buildings, such as solar panels, as upgrades rather than just refurbishing what's already there. And also, I note that if so, it's not an awful lot of money to go around these public buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Who could answer that one, please?
Thank you. I'm not entirely sure of the all of the details of the restrictions on that grant. I don't know whether would Mr. Hawke be the right person to ask on that one.
Leader, I can probably assist with that.
Yes, please.
Yes, so the community project grants, my understanding is they have a maximum allocation of £5,000. So they are mainly intended for community projects, so that may be a project within the parish or something for the village hall, are examples of things that we've given in the past, or sports facilities. In the main, it isn't for things such as solar panels, but that is something that we are looking at on our buildings as part of our climate change strategy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sellis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question, can our council, our comms department possibly, give reassurance to any residents listening that West Edinburgh Council is always actively looking at practical and innovative ways of reducing expenditure, focusing on efficient, effective and economical ways of delivering services? We do seek value for money.
Thank you, Councillor Sellis. Yes, and that goes as much for the revenue budget as the capital budget. As you all know, we established a number of years ago a committee which has actually looked at our financial situation and our financial planning in conjunction with Mrs. Buckle's team. And I think that the value for money that we offer and the way in which we're looking to always try and reduce expenditure is there for everybody to see if they looked at the work in particular of that committee and the way that our budget process is run. So I think you make a very good point, and I thank you for it.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Councillor Moody's next, Chair.
Mr. Mayor, my question's been answered. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My eye was taken away for Councillor Yellen, who has all my sympathies when it comes to internet issues. Any more questions? No, for us, Councillor Jury to do the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to put in front of the council the recommendations on page 91 of your agenda papers, that the council approve the capital programme for 21-22, which totals 1.075 million, and the funding of the 21-22 capital programme from the funding sources set out in section 4. If I could have a seconder for those recommendations, please.
I'm happy to second those, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Debate, please. Nothing in times, Mr. White.
Nothing I can see, Mr. Mayor.
So if we can confirm the wording of the substantive motion, Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we're voting on parts A and B as per the screens, namely that the council approve the capital programme for 2021-22, totalling 1.75 million, and part B, the funding of the 2020-21 capital programme of 1.75 million from the funding sources set out in section 4. So members are voting on parts A and B combined as per the screens. In alphabetical order, members, Councillor Ball.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Bridgewater.
For.
Councillor Cheadle.
For.
Sorry, Councillor Coulson.
For.
Councillor Crozier.
For.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Daniel.
For.
Councillor Edmonds.
For.
Councillor Ewings.
For.
Councillor Hayworth.
For.
Councillor Hipsey.
For.
Councillor Jewelry.
For.
Councillor Kemp.
For.
Councillor Kimber.
For.
Councillor Leach.
For.
Moody.
For.
Councillor Mott.
For.
Moyes.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Musgrave.
4.
Councillor Pearce.
4.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
4.
Renders.
4.
Councillor Ridges.
4.
Mr. Samuel.
4.
Sellis.
4.
Southcott.
4.
Bettigue.
4.
Councillor Vashon.
4.
Councillor Wood.
4.
And finally, Councillor Yelland.
4.
Great, thank you, members. That's therefore 31 members and unanimous for parts A and B of the recommendation, and that's therefore duly carried. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, members, for your attendance today. And by my watch, we've managed to do this meeting in exactly...
We haven't yet, Mr. Mayor. We've got one more agenda item, item 12, business grants.
It's not on my... I'm missing it somewhere. It's not on my...
Apologies, we have item 12.
That's all right, beg your pardon. See, I was so keen. I thought it was going to do that with it. Still, bear with me, please. Okay. Item 12, business grants. Councillor Cheadle to introduce report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For a minute there, I thought I'd got away with it.
So did I.
But the good news is, members, if you follow this paper from start to finish, you'll have qualified for your module in a GCSE in COVID grants. The paper before you is in two parts. Firstly, it outlines the schemes which offer support to businesses who have been mandated to close during the COVID restrictions. That's the Local Restriction Support Grant, brackets, closed, and the Closed Business Lockdown Payment, or the CBLP. Secondly, it seeks to adjust an additional scheme called the Additional Restrictions Grant, that's the ARG, a scheme that was introduced to provide assistance to those businesses whilst not forced to close, nevertheless were suffering as a result of the COVID restrictions. When introduced, the ARG, for which the government provided a fixed amount for local authorities to administer, expires on the 31st of December 2021. Initially, there was concern that the ARG would be oversubscribed, and therefore a relatively high bar was set for applicants. But this has not proved to be the case, and as any unspent funds have to be returned, we're keen to ensure that the fund goes as far as it can to support businesses in need. This paper therefore proposes that the bar is lowered to bring both the eligibility and the amount granted in line with the LRSG closed scheme, basically making the two schemes almost identical. Very recently, literally today, a further proposal has been submitted, and this is shown in red on the screen, which is to fund yet another scheme, the LRSG Open, from the ARG. So the ARG is undersubscribed, and we're moving to make it more attractive. The LRSG Open is oversubscribed, so we want to give people that have no longer got access to that, access to it through the ARG. And it's hoped by doing these tweaks to the system, the maximum amount of support will be given to the business community before the various schemes close and come to an end. The third recommendation in the paper proposes to allocate 20% of the ARG, that's a total of £320,000, to support strategic economy recovery projects. Fourthly, it's proposed that any funding not issued by the 31st of December 2021 is transferred to a business support earmarked reserve to support ongoing economic development across West Devon. And finally, the paper proposes to seek authority to delegate subsequent grant policies to the Director of Place and Enterprise in consultation with the portfolio holder for finance and the S151 officer. I'm very happy to take questions on the paper, and I'm equally happy to say that Chris Brooke is around should any curveballs appear. Thank you very much.
Currently, Mr. Mayor, there's no questions in the box.
Just give it a second.
Councillor Ball has put a question in, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Councillor Ball, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I couldn't type quickly enough, and I thought, oh, I'm going to miss my opportunity. Thank you, Councillor Cheadle, for presenting it. I think it sounds good news. Could you just, in a very brief way, explain how companies can apply, and what are the headline restrictions, or what will enable them to apply, I think is what I'm asking. I can think of a couple of businesses in my ward that might benefit, and I just wondered, is it by size of business, drop in turnover? How's it going forward, please? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll defer the detail to Chris Brooke, but it is, you're right, in the amount that can be claimed depends on the size of the business and a demonstration of a loss in revenue due to COVID. But if Chris Brooke is around, he might put the details on that.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. I'm happy to answer those questions if that's helpful.
Thank you.
So yeah, we have various different schemes up and running at the same time. So since November, the council's actually paid out 4.9 million in business grants, starting from the national lockdown in November. So we've got different schemes. We've got the November closed addendum scheme, the LRSG open and the LRSG closed. If I just and also a scheme specifically for wet-led pubs. If I just explain briefly some of those schemes. So the November closed addendum scheme was for businesses that were mandated to close. So there was legislation which was issued in November around which specific businesses those were. So, for example, that was mainly around the hospitality and leisure industry. Again, for LRSG Open, this is the one that we are seeing lots of applications to. Again, that is for businesses that have been impacted by the restrictions that are mainly in the hospitality, leisure, bed and breakfast sector. There's also a specific grant for wet-led pubs. So these are pubs which are predominantly drinking establishments. So that's why they're called wet-led pubs. There's a specific scheme for those. In addition to that, as we've moved into January, there are further grants available called the closed system scheme and this lockdown payment scheme. So there are amounts available for those as well. There are different schemes depending on whether businesses are business rated, if they have a business rated harassment. If they don't, then they can apply to some of those schemes, for example, the LRSG Open. But again, that's predominantly for hospitality, leisure businesses. If a business is part of a supply chain, so for example, that if they were a fishmonger, then they may have been impacted but not mandated to close. And in those types of businesses, we can help through the ARG scheme, through the discretionary scheme. So there are many different combinations. We have set out the main criteria that businesses would need to meet for each of those different schemes. But if members have got any specific examples, please feel free to contact me and we can point you in the right direction for those. On our website, there is one main application form. If businesses fill in that application form and tell us about their business, how they've been impacted, our assessment team, our business grant team can then look at that, and we can see which grants businesses would be eligible for. So businesses don't have to work that out themselves. If they fill out that main grant form, which is on our website, then we can see which of the various schemes businesses be eligible for grants for. Sorry, that's quite a long-winded answer, but hopefully that helps.
Mr. Mayor, may I come back, please?
Certainly.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Buckle. That was very, very helpful. I think one of the concerns, through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may speak to Mrs. Buckle, one of the concerns that has been raised to me locally is that people have applied partly directly to central government money, as well as obviously through ourselves, and got knocked back because of the size of their business. You know, they're either too small or whatever. But I think if I may, talk to you outside of this meeting maybe, and I can then get some further information to you that maybe can help them go in the right direction. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor.
Yes, certainly, Councillor Ball. Sorry, I did forget to mention that the criteria which we have, as Councillor Cheadle said, relaxed is around the impact on turnover, which initially was around having to show a 50% reduction, and we have changed that to say if businesses can demonstrate a 10% reduction in their turnover or in their profit, or an increase in fixed costs. So part of this report is recommending that 50% is changed down to 10%. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that's partially answered my question, actually, but I'll ask it anyway, which is a question about the ARG, the Additional Restrictions Grant, and I really wonder what's been the issue with it and the low take-up, and will these issues be addressed to enable a bigger take-up? I mean, there are a lot of people, as Councillor Ball's mentioned, that spoken to me to say their businesses have been affected, but either for some reason they don't apply for these grants, or they've been turned down and are left with nowhere else to go. And I'm particularly thinking of people who work in the arts, musicians, and anybody else, people who work in the theatre, people who've got small businesses from home, and these people are actually suffering because they seem to fall through the cracks. And initially I thought the ARG would be the perfect place for them to go if they can't get help from anywhere else, but that doesn't seem to have been the case. So has this been looked at, and can we advertise it more widely? Thank you.
Mrs. Puggle.
Yes, thank you. In terms of where have we advertised the scheme, so we have sent email notifications out to all of the businesses which we've got on our Business Voice database and businesses that have applied in the past. The leader also went on Radio Devon early in the morning to also say about the business grants that are available and encouraging businesses to apply. As I said, there is that link on our website that if businesses put in their information, we can see which grant schemes they would be eligible for. Unfortunately, with the ARG scheme, it is national criteria to some extent have been set out. So what we aren't able to do is the business grants aren't able to be a supplement for loss of wages. So the government have been quite clear that customers have to apply through the self-employed support scheme for that, and we aren't able to give business grants that would replace loss of wages. So that's where in some instances we haven't been able to help, but that is a national criteria, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just come back in there, I think members would be interested to note that the team managing these grants very much are taking the view that they want to find reasons to say yes rather than reasons to say no. The bar was set high to start with because we were worried, given it's a finite amount of money and a finite time, that the ARG would be oversubscribed. That hasn't proved to be the case, so the bar has been lowered, and we're very much hoping now that the take-up will be greater. But the team really are trying to get these grants out to the businesses that need them.
Thank you. Councillor Spidigue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was about point 5 of the proposal in regard to the ability of the Director of Placement to make decisions about the scheme. I think I've just found the answer to my question down in 6.2. I don't know if Mr. Brooks can clarify that. I was just curious as to the breadth and the potential timescale of that the delegated authority.
Mr. Brooks.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm covering for Mr. Brooks today.
Sorry. Yes.
Yes, so recommendation 5 was around if we were to come out of these restrictions and move into further restrictions, and for there to be further business grants that we would need to administer, and therefore further policies that we would need to put in place very quickly. What we were asking members is whether or not we could have delegated authority in consultation with the leader, portfolio holder for finance, and myself as Section 151 to approve any subsequent grant policies. In the main, those grant policies are national policies, so it is more administrative procedure. If there are any over which where there's an element of discretion, then those types of policies we can bring back to members. But if it's ones where we're just administering national guidance, but we do have to have a policy in place very quickly so that we can pay money out to businesses quickly, that's what recommendation 5 is around. Could we have delegated authority to get those policies in place and get the money out quicker to the businesses, or else we would need to hold a full council meeting to present those policies to members, and that might slow up getting the money out to the businesses.
Of course, that's great. Thank you, Mrs. Buckle.
Thank you. Councillor Renders, please.
Thank you. Just a couple. I think you've answered one of it. I just wanted to make sure on that, because I remember when we looked at this a while ago, and I think we were given an assurance that when people applied for this, we would look at other loans that they would qualify for. And I was just curious to see how that worked, and was that working at the minute? And I think you answered by saying there was a form on there. You could just fill the form in. Don't have to apply for a specific loan, but we would then, as a team, be able to look at that and then point them in the right direction. The second point is just to do with some of the criteria, and I can actually completely sympathise or empathise with one of the people that came to me, and I'll use myself so as not to give any names away of other people, but the criteria is based on turnover. And you've gone, I think you mentioned that it used to be on 50% turnover loss, it would then go down to 10%. There are a number of businesses out there, one of which is mine, that has not been hit by a drop in turnover, more of a change of what they're actually selling within their business. And if I use, let me try to think, a good example being tourist-backed little shop that I have. We rely very heavily on the tourist trade as well. They would come in and buy things like ice cream, sweets and drinks, where there is a healthy profit margin in them. What's happened during the course of lockdown is that my sales in cigarettes have gone through the roof. Now, cigarettes are quite an expensive item, as is alcohol. Unfortunately, the profit margins in said items are so much. I mean, you're talking about 4% sometimes in a lot of the cigarettes. So if I can empathise with them and say, yes, I understand where you're coming from, because their profits have plummeted, even though their turnover hasn't. So their overhead has remained the same. Would that be something we could look at? And could I repoint them back in that general direction? Or is that because national criteria is saying it's got to be turnover, turnover, turnover? And of course, turnover is only a small part of running a business. It's not always about how much you turn over, it's what you're taking with it.
Yeah, we can certainly look at a drop in net profit as well as a drop in turnover, or indeed if there's been an increase in fixed costs. So anything which is impacting on the financial position of the business, we can certainly consider. And with regards to the loans, we're not looking at giving advice on the government business loans to customers. So though that's signposted on our website, things like the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, the bounce back loans, that isn't something that council officers are giving advice on. We're purely looking at the business grants.
Can I come back slightly on that? I think that's where I'm confused, because I can remember Mr. Brooks saying that if somebody applied for a business loan, there might be other loans that they were entitled to, and we were going to advise accordingly. Is that not the case now?
Sorry, I think it's if they're entitled to a business grant.
Oh, a grant, then okay, yes. Yeah, beg your pardon, not a loan, no, yeah.
And if we can see, whilst assessing that grant, that we can see that they're eligible for another grant as well, then we would automatically process that grant, that additional grant for them as well. So we have seen many businesses that have applied under one scheme and have actually been really pleased to know that they're also eligible for other schemes, and have actually received a payment quite a bit larger than they were initially applying for or expecting.
That's excellent. I think that's something we need to publicise as well, because it's good. It looks good on the council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sellers.
Thanks. This is a more operational and duty of care question, please. Is the grant scheme team, revs and benefits, I presume, coping okay with the caseload associated with all these grants? And has the team identified ways where the process might be conducted more easily? I was just wondering whether West Devon is able to give any feedback directly back to government relating to the process, and if local businesses might be experiencing rejection or difficulties because of the process. And I just wondered whether basically is West Devon able to give government any feedback relating to the process, Lisa?
We are asked for feedback relating to the process through BAYS. So they have, particularly after the summer when we went through the first set of grants, they were very much in consultation with officers that were administering the grants to say, what sort of things have you come across? How could they help us with administering the grants? That has certainly been something which BAYS are very keen to engage with us on. And how can are there ways in which they could help with that? So we have given feedback on that. With regards to the business grants team, I think the flexibility of our case management model has meant that we have been able to upskill other members in the case management team to help us to administer the business grants. We've also pulled in resources from the internal audit team, which has been very helpful through Devon Audit Partnership to help us administer those. We have also been offering overtime to staff to do some of that work. And yes, I think the other thing that we've done is Jim Davis has led on this, but through the business improvement team, very much looking at how we could streamline the application form. So one application form that could mean that could give us all the information that we would need for multiple grant schemes. And I think simplifying the application process and having one form plus a supplementary form has really helped us to administer those schemes in a very efficient manner, rather than having different application forms for different schemes. The way it's been streamlined has made the process very efficient in my view. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? It's gone quiet.
There's no more questions in the chat box, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. If I can ask Councillor Cheadle to put forward the recommendation, get it proposed and seconded, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before I do that, I'd just like to pay credit to the team that's been administering these grants. They've done an incredible amount of work, hugely complex, as you can begin to see from the paperwork and some of the questions that have been asked. And they've done that all remotely, which is a huge effort, extremely well done. So I move the recommendations that are on the screen in front of you, which are not exactly the same as the ones in the paperwork you received prior to the meeting. They are changed by the red writing in recommendation 2. Can I have a seconder for those, please?
Happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Debate. No debate.
No debate, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so if we can confirm the wording of a substantive motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is as per the screens, and apologies, Councillor Pearce wishes to address the.
Yes, sorry, I see. Thank you, Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm afraid my typing isn't that quick. Yes, I welcome these recommendations, and you know, I would like to say how grateful a lot of the business community are to the support and the help we've given them over the last 12 months. And I think the team that have been dealing with this have just been absolutely incredible. The workload and the complication is you know, been quite immense, especially nearly 12 months ago now when the first lockdown was. I do welcome this, and especially I welcome the addition to item 2, recommendation 2, which is set out in red. I think, you know, this is common sense to my mind, and I really welcome it because it will give us extra ornaments, if you like, or extra help to the businesses rather than sending the money back to central government if we don't use it. It's far better in our community than it is in London. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any more debates? So, go back to where I was confirmed. The wording of the substantive motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The wording is as per the screens, with, as has been alluded to a couple of times, the addition to the report recommendation, which is the second sentence at little 2. So members, we're therefore going to be voting on parts 1 to 5 as per the screens on block. Thank you. Councillor Ball.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
4.
Bridgewater.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Cheadle.
4.
Councillor Coulson.
4.
Councillor Crozier.
4.
Councillor Davies.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Daniel.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Ewings.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Hayworth.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Hipsey.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Drury.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Leach.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Moody.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Mott.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Moyes.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Musgrave.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Ratcliffe.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Renders.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Ridges.
4.
Councillor Samuel.
4. You get it?
Councillor Sellis.
4.
Councillor Southcott.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Spetigui.
4.
Councillor Vashon.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Wood.
4.
And Councillor Yelland.
4.
Thank you, members. That's therefore unanimous in favour of the recommendations parts 1 to 5 as per the screen. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much indeed. Touch of deja vu here, teaching not to turn over 2 pages at once. So many thanks for everybody attending and for the good debates. For our officers, we managed to get this done in an hour and a half, whereas some councils take a lot longer, as I've been told. So thank you again very much, and I officially close this meeting at 5:30.